wanted to find a bank with a purpose. I wanted to find a place that would take my money and not use it to cause the financial crisis, but to fix the financial crisis and to help end income inequality.
The people that we employ are usually clients right off the streets. They don't have an account, but Amalgamated is willing to get that started for them.
Their reputation of supporting the working man, I think, speaks for itself. This is a bank that cares for their customers, and I appreciate that.
We were able to access a construction loan through the bank's programs, and that loan has helped us house 28 families in the community.
Amalgamated is a bank that was started for and about working people.
Many of our customers have a deep commitment to advocating for social and economic justice. We share that commitment, and we're not afraid to stand up and say that we need to change some of the way that the country does business.
Giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show. Live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Well, after about a whole week of threats, the president said yesterday, nah, I'm not going to close the border after all. I'm going to put Mexico on a 1-year trial. What do you say, everybody? Here we go. See, you can't believe a word he says because he's going to change his mind 5 minutes later. Happy Friday. It is Friday, April 5. Can you believe it? Here we go with the Bill Press Show. Hello, hello. Coming to you live from Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. And wherever you are here in this great land of ours, we are right there alongside of you. Joining you today to talk about the news of the day online, on radio, and on television. Thanks so much for joining in. We got lots to talk about. Before you go into the weekend, you got to know all the latest, everything that's happening, and then you can coast for the next couple of days. But not yet. 2 hours to go before we let you free into the weekend. Thanks so much for joining us. Yes, indeed, Donald Trump did back down on the border. He got so much flack from members of his own administration, his own economic team, plus every business organization in the country who normally support Republicans, telling Donald Trump he was nuts to close the border, and he backed down yesterday. Meanwhile, he also says there might be a deal with China in the making, the biggest deal, if you believe him, ever in the history of humankind. But, of course, that's because he's the king of deals. Right, the art of the deal. All that to talk about and a whole lot more, including one new candidate for president among the Democrats and maybe 2 or 3 more coming in. Send us your comments on Twitter. Get ready. Join the conversation on Twitter, @BP Show, @BP Show. But first...
This is the Full Court Press.
All righty, just a couple of other stories making news. Okay, so the new baseball season is underway, as you know, Bill.
I know.
You know it's a great time of year.
Nats won again yesterday.
They sure did. Well, the New York Yankees, they had an injury. Their third baseman, Miguel Andujar, had an injury before a game earlier this week, so they needed a backup. So they went to the minor leagues. Tyler Wade is the player, and he played in Scranton, which is a lower team for the New York Yankees. So as soon as he heard he needed to play, the Yankees were said, get here as soon as you can.
He took the bus.
Close.
Uber.
He took an Uber.
No.
2 hour. It's a 2-hour Uber ride, but he said, damn it, the Yankees called. I got to get there. So he hopped in an Uber, took a 2-hour ride all the way to New York City, where he was on the team for that night.
Good for
look,
him.
you gotta, however you get there, you got to get there. You know, when your name is called to go play in the major leagues, you gotta make it happen.
I just hope the Yankees reimbursed him for his Uber fare.
By the way, they did.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's because someone asked him about it later and asked him how much it cost, and he says, I honestly, the Yankees are handling that part of it. But they said get here as fast as you can, and that's the fastest he thought he could get there. Okay, so the situation with Boeing is still ongoing. There was the Ethiopian Airlines accident. Well, one of the women that was on the plane that died, her name is Samia Stumo. She's 24 years old. Well, her family has filed a lawsuit against Boeing. And when I say her family, I mean her uncle is Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader actually spoke about the damage that Boeing could be doing.
If we don't get this right, if we don't end the cozy relationship between the Patsy FAA, the captured agency, which had been documented for years, and the Boeing company, 5,000 of these fatally flawed planes will be in the air all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one person you don't want to piss off in this situation, it would be Ralph Nader.
Ralph Nader, still on the job.
Still doing it, man.
Yeah, still doing it. Still on the warpath. And Boeing admitted yesterday that they were at fault.
Yep.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Number 16, the member of Congress from the Rust Belt from Ohio, Tim Ryan, jumps into the 2020 race yesterday, appearing on ABC's The View. Tim Ryan, a veteran guest of the Bill Press Show, the latest Democrat to say he's going to run for president in 2020. Are you keeping score? Do you have a program to list all the candidates so you don't forget any of them? What do you say? Hello, everybody. Here we go on a Friday. Hope you're doing great. It is the Bill Press Show, and we welcome you to the program, and thank you for joining us for our roundup of the news of the day for the next 2 hours. That's what we'll be doing, bringing you up to date on everything happening here in Washington. That's where we start out with our studio on Capitol Hill. Bring you up to date on everything going on here in Washington, around the country, and around the globe. And joining you online on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. Joining you on the radio, statewide in Indiana, on Indiana Talks. And Chicago, we are there with you in on WCPT, the big, powerful, progressive voice of Chicago, which owns Chicago and the surrounding communities. Great to be with you out in Chicagoland, and also nationwide, coast to coast, on the one and only 24/7 full-time progressive TV channel in the country, and that, of course, is Free Speech TV. And remember, it's a two-way street. We'll tell you what's going on. You tell us what it means to you, to your community, to your family, by sending us your comments on Twitter @BP Show, @BP Show. As I mentioned, right at the very top, let's start on some 2020 news today. Then we'll get to the latest from the Trump White House. It gets so depressing talking about the Trump White House. Let's talk about where we go in 2020. Yes, indeed, the field got a little larger yesterday with our friend, a frequent guest on the Bill Press Show. We always tease him that he got his start in the media on the Bill Press Show. Congressman Tim Ryan from Ohio. He had talked about running. I thought he had sort of given up on it, but he showed up on The View yesterday, pretty good launching spot, and made it official. Here's the good congressman.
And I can go back just a few weeks where my daughter called me crying from school because her friend was crying to her. Her dad just got transferred at the local General Motors plant. The kids had to move.
Yeah.
And my daughter called me and she said, "You got to do something." And I said, "I'm going to do something, and I'm going to run for president of the United States, and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen anymore."
There you go. Again, a lot of people have said what we need is somebody who represents the middle America, and we got a couple of them now. Pete Buttigieg from South Bend, Amy Klobuchar, of course, from Minnesota, and now Tim Ryan from Ohio. Right in the middle of the Rust Belt, representing Youngstown, Akron, Ohio, areas that have been hard hit by jobs moving overseas, steel mills, auto mills closing down. A message of economic recovery and jobs that we thought we might hear from Sherrod Brown from Ohio, who is not running. Tim Ryan is. Now, you might ask, could anybody go from, by the way, I think he's the third member of Congress running this year. Tulsi Gabbard, of course, from Hawaii, and John Delaney from Maryland. But I know you ask, here's a good cocktail question, could anybody go right from Congress to the White House? Could a member of Congress leap all the way, win the presidential election, go from Congress directly to the White House? All right, the question is, the answer right is yes. Only one other person has done it in history.
I feel like I knew this answer at one point, but I've forgotten.
James Garfield. James Garfield was a congressman from Ohio who was still today the only member of Congress elected to the White House. And the good news for Tim Ryan is that he's from Ohio.
Yeah. So, that helps, I guess.
I know. When I had dinner with Tim Ryan to talk about this, I looked that up ahead of time because I wanted to tell him, Tim, no member of Congress has ever made it all the way to the White House. This is a foolish errand. And I found out there was only one congressman who had, and he happened to have been from Ohio.
Well,
that's the good news. The bad news is he was assassinated 6.5 months later.
Yeah, true.
So you got to.
You win some, you lose some.
You win some, you lose some, right. Anyhow, congratulations to Tim Ryan. We'll get him in, and we'll talk to him more about that race. And by the way, not to be outdone, Eric Swalwell from California, who has been talking about it, he told some people yesterday, well, Tim's not going to be the only member, or those other two. I'm getting in too, he said, next week. We'll tell you when that happens, but reportedly, he told a couple of people about that yesterday.
And, you know, the interesting thing about Swalwell, which I'm not so sure that he's got a great shot, but he is essentially going to be running, as he said, reportedly, sort of a one-issue campaign, and that is gun control.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Gun safety.
Right.
That's going to be his issue. And, you know, it's hard to sort of break out of this big pack of candidates. And
unless you got a good issue.
If you've got a good issue, like I think Jay Inslee
on climate change.
Yeah.
And maybe you say it's Bernie's Medicare for all, and Elizabeth Warren is the wealth tax.
Yeah.
I don't know. But he's also got another challenge. Of course, he's California, and Kamala Harris is way up there and has a lot more name recognition and support in California. And I don't mean to put him down, Eric Swalwell. We'll see what happens there. I thought Pete Buttigieg was already in, and really he is. But everybody sort of gets a double take now on when they announce and when they officially announce. I mean, they announce and then they did a great big thing. Kamala Harris did it that way. So did Kirsten Gillibrand. Now it's Pete Buttigieg. He said yesterday he's going to have his official launch in South Bend, Indiana, on April 14. You know, that'll be a big event. Everybody in South Bend will come out, whether they like it or not, just to be part of a presidential launch. And the only other news I saw on the 2020 front yesterday is, Bernie Sanders has gotten a little flack because he hasn't released his tax returns. He should. I believe every presidential candidate should. And someday we'll get Donald Trump's tax returns too. But this idea that you don't have to release your tax returns until you become the nominee is nonsense. Release them now. What do they have to hide? Bernie's got nothing to hide. He's not a wealthy man. He doesn't have any deals with Russia or Deutsche Bank or whatever. But he did tell CNN.
Or does he?
Or does he? That's right. Anyhow, he told CNN yesterday, almost promised, but hinted that he'll be releasing his returns on April 15, which is when all the rest of us are going to be releasing our returns to the IRS. On the switching back to the Donald Trump front here, and let's just go from tax returns of Bernie to tax returns of Donald Trump. As we know, the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, Richard Neal from Massachusetts, day before yesterday, wrote a letter to the IRS commissioner following, by the way, the IRS manual saying, okay, we're doing our job that's laid out for us in the IRS code, and we are taking advantage of the opportunity there to request the last 6 years of the president's tax returns. The IRS code manual says Congress has a right to ask And it also says the commissioner must reveal them, must supply them, must provide them. The White House has a different point of view. Donald Trump keeps saying, I'm under audit. Don't talk to me. Talk to my lawyers. Yeah.
Speak to my lawyers. I'll speak to the Attorney General.
But Speaker Pelosi yesterday said, no, we don't need to speak to your lawyers. We can read the law.
The IRS manual requires an audit of the president, and Congress has the duty to ensure that has been done and done properly.
In other words, the Democrats are saying, okay, you're under audit. Well, we want to audit your audits. Whether you're under audit or not, it doesn't make any difference. And it was even on Fox News, a man that we find ourselves turning to more and more from Fox and Friends. Fox is not just that show, but he's on there a lot. Their legal analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano, who said yesterday, yeah, the president's going to try to hide behind the old audit excuse, but it doesn't wash.
I understand the president's argument that he's under audit, and an audit is private. So if he's under audit, he knows it, and the people doing the audit know it. The public doesn't know it. That would not be a defense.
Not a defense. All right. So Donald Trump, you watch Fox News. Take it from Fox News. Maybe he can't pay too much attention to it because Donald Trump, is too busy figuring out who he's going to put on the Fed. There are 2 vacancies on the Federal Reserve Board. And I find it very interesting that Donald Trump seems to want to fill the Fed with people who are just like him. He has nominated for one position Stephen Moore, a conservative economist from the Heritage Foundation. Used to see him a lot on CNN. Used to see him on Crossfire back when I was doing Crossfire. Steve Moore, who's in a little trouble now because he didn't pay his taxes. He's got a lot of overdue taxes that he owes, child support that he owes, and alimony payments that he owes. So he was not behind. He just refused to pay, failed to pay all of those. Got himself in a little hot water. But again, just like Donald Trump, who is, so far as we know, didn't pay his taxes either. Now for the second position, Donald Trump has a different person in mind. An old buddy of his, he says, and he made it clear yesterday, this is the guy I plan to appoint.
I've recommended Herman Cain. He's a very
Herman Cain,
a terrific man, a terrific person. He's a friend of mine. I have recommended him highly for the Fed.
Now, why is Herman Cain like Donald Trump? Not just because he ran for president. He did, remember, back in 2012. How could we forget? But Herman Cain had to drop out of the race because he was accused of sexual harassment by 4 different women when he was head of the National Restaurant Association. They ended up settling those cases for unknown millions of dollars, and Herman Cain dropped out of the presidential race. Another sexual predator getting... This reminds me of Donald Trump supporting Roy Moore, right? He doesn't care, right? They're just like him.
Yeah, this is certainly not disqualifying in Donald Trump's eyes.
No, not on Donald Trump's eyes. Right, exactly. And as Sherrod Brown pointed out, Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio, the problem is the president is really trying to stack the Fed with his, once again, not people who really understand the Fed, understand monetary policy, and are there because they can bring something to the board, but just simply because they're political cronies of Donald Trump. Here's Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio.
They've generally been fair-minded and even-handed, and you don't politicize the Federal Reserve as this president has done.
Mitt Romney, good point, Senator Brown. Mitt Romney, also senator from Utah now, weighed in yesterday as well, saying he thought Herman Cain would be a lousy appointment, and he feared that if he became a member of the Fed, that he said if he ever were confirmed, we know what the new interest rates would be. 9.
I have
remember that
PTSD
about
the 999 and the weird Herman Cain surge.
That's right. At one time, he did surge.
He absolutely was at the top of the polls.
Top of the polls, head of the pack in 2012. But, of course, what we remember most fondly about the Herman Cain campaign is pizza.
Imagine there's no pizza. I couldn't if I tried. Eating only tacos or Kentucky Fried.
I'll give him this.
I'll give him that.
The guy can sing.
The guy can sing.
I'll give him that.
That was so well done and so funny.
I mean, we forget.
Godfather Pizza.
Godfather Pizza, which is one of the worst pizzas you could. I think there are only a couple of.
I've never had it, but I wouldn't even try.
I'll tell you, best way to describe it: it's gas station pizza. Like literally,
really?
If there are certain places you'll go to get gas, and there'll be a Godfather's Pizza inside the gas station. You got to be pretty hungry to eat that pizza.
Well, if he gets there, those board meetings of the Fed are going to be pretty lively.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure it will be
pretty lively. Yeah. Anyhow, there is, and the other thing Donald Trump was up to yesterday. Yes, indeed. We've made this point before. That boy, his rhetoric is tough, and he talks tough, and man, he threatens, and he just storms through a room. But there's the chicken side of Donald Trump too, which is if you really stand up to him, you put pressure on him, he'll back down, as he did yesterday on the border. This is all we've been talking about. All people have been talking about. We haven't spent that much time on it here on the Bill Press Show. But the big issue has been the border. He's going to close the border. What? $1.7 billion in trade every day, and the farmers are going to get hurt, and the auto manufacturers, the auto industry is going to close down, and people won't be able to get to their jobs and to school, those who live near the border, and the American economy is going to tank. These were the arguments made not just by Democrats again, but by Donald Trump's top economic advisors saying, this is crazy. Republicans in Congress saying this is idiotic. Well, yesterday, Donald Trump caved and he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give Mexico a year, and we're going to see how they do in stopping the flow of drugs into the United States. If they don't do a better job on the drugs, we're going to put tariffs on any automobiles coming in from Mexico. And if they still haven't done a better job at the border a year from now, then we're going to close the border. So now he's put it off for a year, and he's going down there today, flying down to El Paso and then going to the border, where he still claims that they are building this wall as we speak. They are down there building this wall. Here's Donald Trump yesterday, by the way, and it's simply not true.
The wall is under construction, by the way, large sections. We're going to be meeting, I think, on Friday at a piece of the wall that we've completed, a big piece. A lot of it's being built right now. A lot of it's being signed up right now by different contractors.
And we had Dara Linden from Vox, right, yesterday, who pointed out, asked her that very question. And she said there's no new wall being built. I mean, what they're doing is repairing some, maybe rebuilding some sections of the wall that have already been in place. But I've lost track of how many times has Donald Trump gone down to the. I mean, he just goes down there for these little photo ops, walks along a little section of the thing, gets back on Air Force One, and then flies home. I mean, it's totally meaningless photo op, which is probably costing us about $5 million.
Oh, yeah, easily.
Yeah,
easily.
To take the whole,
to go down there and do nothing.
Right, totally. Except bitch again about the border and how we have to shut down the border, which he is not doing. But he does have a deal in the works. Not a deal with Mexico. He's got a deal in the works with China.
The deal is coming along really well. We'll probably know over the next 4 weeks. It may take 2 weeks after that to get it papered.
So what I'd like to know, anyhow, and he says there's going to be a big summit with President Xi also once the deal is done. So I think we all have a right to know and curiosity as to What is in this deal with China? How about, Mr. President, can you give us some of the details of the deal?
This will be a really terrific, very unique deal. This is an epic deal, historic, if it happens.
I see. So it's unique, it's epic, historic. Well, let me ask again, Mr. President, how about like some of the detailed provisions and the biggest, just don't have to name them all, the biggest points in this deal?
It's going very well. Top officials are here, and we're very well along on the deal. It's a very complex deal. It's a very big deal. It's one of the biggest deals ever made, maybe the biggest deal ever made.
Oh, so now we know it's not only unique, historic, it's complex, and it's very big, very big.
The biggest deal ever made.
All right.
The biggest deal ever made.
No. All right, I hate to be a pain in the ass, but let me ask again, how about some of the details, the major provisions?
Still haven't gotten them.
It's a very unique set of circumstances, but it's a massive deal. Could be one of the, I guess it is if you think about it, the biggest deal ever made. There can't be a deal like this. No matter where you look, there can't be a deal like this. This is the granddaddy of them all.
Oh, now we got it.
Details.
All right, now we got it.
You got all the details you need, man.
Right. It's a granddaddy, it's historic, it's unique, it's big.
This is the granddaddy of them all.
It's very big. It's the biggest deal ever in the history. This is bigger than the pyramids.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that deal, the pyramid deal, nothing compared to this deal.
Why is it? What is it? I mean, look, I'm not a shrink, but what is it about this man that he can not just do, like, anything? I mean, I'm sorry. If he takes a crap, it's got to be the biggest one ever in the history of humankind.
Sure.
Everything he does has to be the biggest ever in history.
Oh, yes, but also think about, like, when people say, "Are you a racist?" He's like, "There's nobody less racist than me. I am the least racist person who ever lived." Like, it's not a competition.
I don't know.
The man deals in absolutes. I'll give him that.
Yeah, indeed he does. Little bit of good news yesterday. I got to tell you, we've talked a lot, and there's a lot of talk lately about the Electoral College. And look, okay, Pete Buttigieg says it. Almost all the Democratic candidates say, let's get rid of the Electoral College. It is long overdue. Time to get rid of the Electoral College. And we've had two presidents in this young century elected who got to the White House without winning the popular vote. So we believe in the old-fashioned rule that the person who gets the most votes should win the election. Therefore, go by the popular vote, get rid of the Electoral College. That, of course, would take a constitutional an amendment to the Constitution. Or would it? No, not necessarily, because there is this possible end run around the Constitution. If you could get enough states, somebody came up with this idea, it's called the national popular vote. If you could get enough states to agree that whoever wins the popular vote nationwide, they're going to give all their electoral votes to that candidate instead of breaking them down little by little. So many to this candidate, so many to that. Whoever wins the popular vote wins. You could get enough states to add up to 270. You don't have to get rid of the Electoral College. You would replace it with this national popular vote without having to amend the Constitution and go through that whole process. I give you that little background to bring you up to date on the latest. The state of New Mexico yesterday. This is getting to be real. The state of New Mexico voted yesterday to follow and endorse the national popular vote. New Mexico is the 14th state to do so. So now there are 14 states and the District of Columbia that agree. You win the popular vote, you're the President of the United States. If you add all those states up, you get to 189. That's where we are today. All right. So 270. We are exactly, by my count, Peter, 81 votes short.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we need a few more states to add up to 81, and the Electoral College is gone.
But we're getting there.
We're getting there. Yeah. No, that's very exciting. And I hope that with all this talk about the Electoral College and the action of New Mexico, that will encourage a few other states to do so. Why this is important? Let's go back to 2016, the last election. As we know, because he talks about it all the time, Donald Trump got 306 electoral votes. Hillary Clinton got 232. So under the electoral vote count, he definitely president of the United States. That's where he is. But if you look at the popular vote, Hillary Clinton won 48.5% of the popular vote. Donald Trump, 46.4%. So she beat him by 3 or 4 million people. She beat him by 2 percentage points. She should be president of the United States today.
Yeah.
There's just no doubt about it. But again, according to who gets the most votes. Now, you might be wondering. I was wondering this morning, so I checked it out. Here are the states that are on board. So I'd say listen carefully. If your state is not on board, then get to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, it shouldn't be that difficult. Go to the state legislature. I'm sure you get somebody to carry this bill and get it through, get your state on board. So the states that have, in alphabetical order, that have already signed up are part of the national popular vote. California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington State, and now New Mexico, and the District of Columbia. There you go. There's a big one so missing, like Florida's not there. Texas is not there. But two biggest states, California and New York, are.
It's exciting that it's growing.
Yeah.
It's growing.
Absolutely. And, I'd like to see the Democratic candidates for president as they're moving around this year and going from state to state to state, make the point that Elizabeth Warren did when, I forget where she announced this, but she said, it was down in Mississippi.
Mississippi, yeah.
Mississippi, she said, yeah, you don't see the presidential candidates come down here because they're only going after the big electoral votes. Make sure that you do this, they're going to have to come to every state because every state matters.
And you have to see
it's good for democracy with a small d.
It's interesting you see a lot of conservative pass around these maps, right, that show all this red area in the country and then this blue area of the country, which is in pockets. And they say, these red states are going to be completely ignored if we go to a popular vote. Their voice won't be heard. And what they leave out of that is a lot of that is just land. We're talking about population, people, one person, one vote, right? And California, New York happen to be very populous. North Dakota, not so much.
Right. and yet, under the Electoral College, right, land counts more than people.
Land can vote.
Right.
Land can vote.
Land can vote. Lots going on here. By the way, Pete Buttigieg, interestingly, there he is. Just seeing Tim Ryan on Morning Joe this morning, making the rounds. All right. Pete Buttigieg has been talking a lot about his faith and the impact of his faith and raising questions about the sincerity of the faith of Donald Trump and Mike Pence both. Jack Jenkins joins us from Religion News Services to talk about all of that and more. Next here on The Bill Press Show on this Friday, April 5, a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Follow us on Twitter @BP Show. This is The Bill Press Show.
There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children. She didn't know what to do.
Did you have a good day at school?
She gave them some broth without any bread.
There you go.
kiss them all soundly.
Night night.
Good night. And put them to bed. Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org.
Awkward. Do I look familiar? I should. You might remember me from here. Here. Or maybe even here. But an awkward silence can be a great thing. It can actually be a perfect moment to reach out to a friend and ask if they're okay if they seem down. It doesn't matter how you say it.
You all right?
Everything's okay?
All G?
You all right, girl?
Oh,
you cool?
You bugging dog.
Just show you're there for them. Go on, Kelly. It's easy, awkward.
Hey, you haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
Do you want to retire like a champ? Just like legendary basketball star Uncle Drew? Don't do him like that, Uncle Drew! You're already acing the game. You've got your dream ride.
Don't be slamming my door.
Sorry about that.
You just did the same. Gotta get the boys.
Your dream vacation and your dream team. And now you can make your retirement just as legendary.
I get buckets.
Get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes. I mean,
Right.
like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did
So.
This is the Bill Press Show.
On a Friday, April 5, how about it? It is the Bill Press Show. Hello, good people. Good to have you with us today for our little roundup of the news of the day. There's a lot of God talk going on here, particularly in the Democratic primary. Very interesting. Democrats are not afraid to talk about their faith and what it all means to them and how it may influence their political decision-making. Jack Jenkins covers these issues full-time for the Religion News Service and joins us in studio. It's good to see you, sir.
Thanks so much for having me.
Father. Rabbi.
There you go.
Imam, whatever. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for being
We've been at it for a little bit here before you joined us, and we wanted to check back with our listeners and viewers to see their take on the news of the day. Peter?
Yes, indeed. Lots of comments on Twitter. At BP Show. First of all, Connie, shout out Connie. She says she is going to see Mayor Pete tonight in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Uh-huh.
She says that she has learned how to pronounce his name. It's pronounced Buttigieg. He's selling shirts now. Have you seen the shirts?
No.
So it says boot, edge, edge. That's how he says he pronounced Buttigieg.
Well, I remember when he was in here, he basically said Buddha judge.
Yeah, I think we're fine.
That's what I think too. If you think of a Buddha and you think of a judge,
yeah,
Buddha
yeah,
judge.
I think that's right. I think that the T-shirts were sort of a way to make people visually sort of get it. But I like Buddha
judge
and judge. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, some other comments here on Twitter. Tom,
think of Andrew Napolitano, Buddha judge.
There you go. Tom says Trump is a full-throttle con man. At least Kellyanne is a qualified BS artist. Trump is an incompetent grifter. Yikes. Okay. We also have a poll up right now about whether or not you have made up your mind about who you will vote for in the 2020 primary. We just asked you simply, yes or no, have you decided who you will vote for in the 2020 primary? Now, it's early. We just put it up. but it's going to be up all day today. 31% of you say yes.
Wow.
And a very nice 69% of you say no.
Not yet.
Not yet. So if you have a vote, go find us on Twitter at BP Show. And, of course, chime in. People have weighed in on the poll saying who they are voting for. Just to give you an idea, we've got one person says they're voting for Bernie. Another person says they're voting for Elizabeth Warren. And other people saying they just want to hear what everybody else has to say. So you can make your voice heard at BP Show.
With the entry of Tim Ryan yesterday, that makes 16. So you got a lot of choices. Look, you can vote however you want in this poll. My vote is not yet. And I proudly supported Bernie Sanders in 2016 in the Democratic primary because I thought we needed a primary, we needed a challenger, we needed a good debate. That's not, and I still love Bernie. That's not the case this time. We have a lot of choices. So I don't know. Again, you vote however you want. My take right now is I want to see who gets in, and we still have a few more out there, notably Joe Biden, Terry McAuliffe, Eric Swalwell from California, maybe Michael Bennet from Colorado. And then I want to see how they do in the debate, at least the first couple of debates. And because I'm looking for the guy who can take it to Donald Trump. Most take it to Donald Trump. So, Jack, again, good to see you. Are you surprised by all this God talk in the primary?
Yeah. So I've been covering religion and politics for a while, and I'm in this weird place as a religion journalist. Well, there is now fierce competition among my fellow religion journalists to be able to talk to all the candidates about their faith, because they're willing and eager to do so to a lot of us. And that is an interesting shift. Last year I got to speak with Cory Booker about his faith, and he kind of talked about how, he feels like the right claimed religion and that the left has, the capacity to reclaim it, particularly in this political moment. Julian Castro told me a similar thing.
Public guy, just jump in there.
Yeah.
That sounds like it might make a good book, like How the Republicans Stole Religion.
Someone should write that book. Someone should write that book.
Idea. That's an excellent idea.
I wrote that book 10 years ago. And it's still good. May still be available in paperback. I'm not sure.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like it seems like
they
a
did.
story
Democrats, it was like the third rail for Democrats, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Republicans were all, starting with Ronald Reagan, who was not that big a churchgoer, but talking about his religion. And then with the Bushes came in, really, and George W. doing this for his daddy, getting the evangelicals out of the pulpit into the ballot box, basically. Right. Yeah, right. So anyhow, but you mentioned, you talked to Cory Booker and
Julian Castro, and they both were pretty. Well, in Castro, actually, when he announced his campaign, when he announced his exploratory committee, he did so in front of a picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe. This visage of the Virgin Mary that's very important to Catholicism, particularly in Mexico and in Central America. And then when he gave his actual announcement speech, he did so in Guadalupe Plaza, across from Guadalupe Church, where he was baptized. And he made sure to reference both of those things. And his mother, I didn't know this till I spoke with him, was actually on the board of Network, which is this Catholic social justice lobby run by, at this point, Sister Simone Campbell, who actually spoke at the Democratic National Convention in 2012. So he actually has this tie.
It's so funny. I just wrote a check to Network yesterday.
There you go.
Sister Simone Campbell's been on our show. She's great. Nuns on the Bus.
There you go. Yeah. And I think that's kind of part of what's happening here is that the religious left as a protest activist group has actually gotten a lot of attention and play under Trump as part of these big resistance movements. And, I think the religious right has taken a big hit under Trump. And I think those two things combined have given Democrats, it looks like, an opening to talk about their faith.
Not to be too cynical, the Democrats that you've talked to, are they just talking or... do they really mean it?
Well, that's a good question, right? I mean, this is one of the things about, religion journalism is, do you ever take somebody at their word, or do you question or prod them about their faith? I certainly felt like, both of those two people I just mentioned, Cory Booker and Julian Castro, struck me as sincere, right? It's not really my job as a journalist to assess that per se, but I will note that, for instance, in Booker's case, I mean, Booker, when he had his CNN town hall recently, when he was asked about his faith, I mean, he ended up quoting Hebrew, reciting Hebrew during the course of his answer. He's been pretty conversant about religion for quite some time. And Castro, relatedly, like I said, he grew up with a mother who seems to be a very social justice Catholic. I mean, he comes kind of by that version of the tradition, seems pretty honestly. But I do think it'll be an interesting question where if Democrats can continue to talk about their faith pretty regularly, if other Democrats will both, ask him even more deeper, richer questions about that and kind of push him to say, all right, I heard you say a few platitudes. What more does that mean? And then in addition to that, there's also a whole wing of the Democratic Party that's kind of uncomfortable with them talking about their faith, which is where you get the line that Booker said in his town hall where he said, I would rather hang out with a nice atheist than a mean Christian. To me, strikes me as that attempt to try to split the line between the very deeply church-going and worship-going religious people in the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party actually has some of the most church-going Americans in the country. It also has the significantly higher percentage of people who are religiously unaffiliated, who don't claim one religious tradition, who often balk at God talk from a presidential podium. And so you have arguably the most and least religious Americans in the same party, and you want both of their votes. So it's an interesting thing right now.
But does Bernie ever talk about his faith?
So Bernie's been interesting about this.
I never remember hearing Bernie talk about that, and he was the only Jew among all the candidates, and still is, I guess, right?
So
I'm just thinking about this field.
Well, technically, Marianne Williamson, who's also running, is this spiritual guide, and she is also Jewish.
I always forget about her? Gee, I wonder why.
So she, but I will say he talks about. I wrote about this when he.
But she's sort of like a new world,
the category. I think she occupies a lot of different religious spaces at once, but she, some people put her in the New Age category.
Yeah, okay.
And kind of like a self-help category. That's one place.
Yeah.
I'm sure she would balk at most of those definitions, but it certainly seems to be the books that hers are put next to and those sorts of things. But Bernie has struck me as interesting when he talks about his faith. I wrote about this when I worked at ThinkProgress. Is that some people have kind of said labeled him as more of a traditional secular Jew, if that makes any sense, where the tradition and the heritage is important, but the theology is not something he spends a lot of time talking about in public if it is deeply important to him. But he does actually talk about religion, but he often talks about, like he used to cite Pope Francis a lot when he would talk about economics. And recently he released a video on his Twitter feed where it was him meeting with Muslim leaders, and kind of in the aftermath of the Christchurch shooting, the tragic shooting down there with the hands of a white supremacist. And he noted his Jewish heritage and said, this is important to me, and it's a way for me to connect with you across this difference. And so while it's not necessarily saying, God told me to run for president, what it was saying is, your religious heritage and how it seems to be under threat at this precise moment. As a Jew, I also can understand that sensibility and that feeling. And our religious identity, particularly in America, where white supremacy seems to be having quite a moment, is something that I can relate to. And so for him, he doesn't shy away from talking about faith, but it's often like when he is asked about it in the past, he kind of says, "My spirituality is," and then he kind of appeals to what really sounds like a broader progressive ideal of caring for the poor and the immigrant, et cetera, et cetera.
So when it comes to faith and politics. And I think it's fascinating going all the way back to the founding of this country. We've been dealing with this issue. What is the proper role of both, and does faith play any part in politics? Again, that's what I try to get into with my book, How the Republicans Stole Religion. But is it part of the problem?
Never stop plugging. Never stop plugging.
Never stop plugging. But part of the problem, I think, for Democrats is that the religious right has, I think, fairly successfully identified faith, true faith, as being anti-abortion, anti-same-sex marriage, and anti-homosexuality, period. And those are the issues that are identified very wrongly, I believe, as whether or not you are a true person of faith.
Right. Which
and you can't be, you can't be a Christian, they say, and be pro-choice. You can't be a Christian and support. Maybe you can accept LGBTQ Americans, but not if they exercise any sexuality.
Right. Which, for me, makes the recent coverage of Pete Buttigieg's faith really particularly interesting, because he's like a living rejection of that sentiment, right? Because he's an openly gay, Democratic mayor who's now having, rich theological debates, at least, in general with Republicans at this point, by challenging them.
Yeah.
So.
So Buttigieg has in fact challenged, maybe a too strong a word, but he's raised some questions about Mike Pence and Donald Trump.
Yes. Actually, what I think is fascinating about...
By the way, there's a big difference between Donald Trump and Mike Pence, too. And one could also, and let's talk also about how the two of them relate.
Right. I think that's... What's fascinating about Buttigieg's campaign to me is that one could argue that a lot of the coverage he suddenly got out of nowhere relatively recently was rooted in him talking about religion. Like one of the big viral claims that suddenly catapulted him back onto the national stage is when he did his CNN town hall, and they asked him about who would be a better president, Donald Trump or Mike Pence, and he went off to say that his version, Buttigieg's version of Scripture, was rooted in this idea of welcoming the stranger, helping the immigrant, helping the poor. Whereas he compared himself to Mike Pence's version of faith, which he described as more concerned about sexuality and sex. And then said even then he thought he wouldn't align himself with Trump. And he had the closing line that got a lot of attention was him saying, did Mike Pence stop believing in Scripture when he started believing in Donald Trump? I don't know. And that, that's again, an openly gay Democratic candidate, articulating a version of Scripture in a theological context, challenging Mike Pence in a way that got an applause line. And then he kept doing that. He started talking about the rise of the religious left. He started talking about his own faith and his own faith background. And then inevitably, like you said, he had a question about Donald Trump when he was doing a interview recently. And he said, I don't see someone who has, I'm paraphrasing here, but somebody who takes the actions of the president doesn't seem to me like the actions of someone who believes in God. And that, what he described as Trump's worship of self, he sees as inherently incongruous with, a humble faith that he understands as Christianity. And then this was the moment where, with the people who he had to respond to this because he got pushback from the religious right, who said, you shouldn't challenge somebody's faith. Never mind that Trump challenged other people's faith during the 2016 campaign when he tweeted, the tweet still exists, you can look it up, challenged Ted Cruz's evangelical Christianity because, he quote unquote lies a lot or something like that. He also kind of questioned why am I forgetting Ben Carson's faith as well as a Seventh-day Adventist. And so so then Pete Buttigieg is still kind of in many circles winning this theological argument with the religious right, which, as you point out, is an inversion of how these debates used to go, even 5 or 6 years ago.
Why? I get asked this question all the time. Love your response. Why is it, or how can evangelicals, if they really believe what they say they believe, support Donald Trump, given his bragging about sexual assault? I mean, I to tell the what I know, a lot of people made it a big deal that when he and the First Lady went to St. John's Church a couple of weeks ago on a Sunday morning. It's the first time they've been in church since he's been in the White House. Okay, I don't care. I don't care about that. I don't think showing up on a church on Sunday morning is any proof of your faith, right?
Gotcha.
But at any rate,
gotcha.
But what we know about Donald Trump, right? He's hardly somebody you would think of as a devout and believer and whatever. How can evangelicals stick with him?
So this is one of the big questions, and I think there's three.
Go ahead.
I think there's three separate strains of answers here. One is that for some, it's just this raw either or of when confronted with a Democrat or a Republican when it comes down to issues like abortion, often specifically.
Right.
They'll take someone who might be who might have these allegations of sexual impropriety, who is on tape saying
Right.
bragging about sexual assault over someone who supports abortion. It's just the intensity of that theological belief.
Right.
And so even if they think that he's abhorrent, at the end of the day, that's where they'll choose. There's a second strain.
In other words, it's political, right?
Right.
I mean, for them, they want a president who's going to appoint judges who's going to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Yes. And so that is a raw political transaction. Another one is actually deeply theological, and it's these groups of people who often see him as this like a biblical figure like King Cyrus in the Bible, who might be morally impure but can be used by God. And so there's like this very specific theology attached to Trump, where the fact that he is, he presents himself to many as, this morally questionable person is actually evidence of God's favor for him. So that's a whole another thing.
Why wouldn't they make that argument about Bill Clinton?
That's an excellent question that has been asked to many a religious right leader.
You know what? It gets back to politics.
Yes. And the third strain of that, and I think my argument is that all three of these things are true at the same time, is that there was a whole group of evangelicals who were the first to line up behind Trump during the primary, when a lot of more traditional evangelicals were not super excited about him. And that group ended up growing. And that crew seems to be less animated by theological tenets, a specific, a Tim Keller or Russell Moore theological argument about their faith, and more animated by what's often described as Christian nationalism, which is really an identity, so not so much as a theology. So it's like this idea of my Bible in my room, and my cross on my wall, and my American flag, and that's who I am. And they might not have been to church in years, but this Christian nationalism idea is great. And if you have someone like Donald Trump who says, we need to stand for the national anthem and we worship God, not government, these are lines that he would use in his stump speeches, that checks the boxes. And so they will identify as evangelical on a poll, but really what they care about is this broader identity that he represents for them, that often skews heavily white, that often skews towards this sort of hyper-patriotism, nationalistic perspective.
Back to the question that people have asked Pete Buttigieg. When you compare Donald Trump to Mike Pence, I mean, Mike Pence is the true believer, right? He doesn't fake it. Doesn't seem to me.
He certainly, by any traditional metric for how you would base like religious expression, he shows up to church. He's been holding the same theological line for a long time, that sort of thing. Right.
Right. Just related to this, because it's in the news today, not necessarily related to the 2020 campaign. Headline in the New York Times: Mormon Church rescinds policy that stung same-sex families. So it wasn't so long ago that the Mormon faith at the church adopted one policy which they've reversed yesterday. Tell us about it.
So it's about parents, and it's about whether or not
same-sex parents.
Yes,
right.
And about the children of those parents. They're basically their acceptance within the church, and whether they could be accepted and baptized in a traditional sense, and honestly, in many ways, out of the blue, there was this claim that they were basically reversing this decision that basically barred these children from access to many elements of the church, to not only reversing that, but also like reversing the quote-unquote claim of apostasy, which is theologically important in the Latter-day Saint tradition. And what's interesting about this, one, it's important to understand that, within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the authority is different. So like the person in charge is, the prophet, and the prophet gets direct, is still able to change the church things if God speaks to the prophet. And, that's not the same kind of thing. Even within Catholicism, that's not necessarily the same.
Yeah.
It's why, you saw the church reverse its position on race in the 20th century, where apparently they held one position and then the prophet got another revelation from God, and suddenly they had a different perspective on race. And so there's this open question of, there's been actually a lot of activism in Mormon circles for LGBT rights and inclusion. But what triggered this change, and why now?
Well, God spoke to the prophet.
There you go.
I guess, according to their tradition. But it's a welcome change to see the Mormon Church kind of step into the 21st century. But as you said, a surprise and unexpected kind of came out of nowhere. Well, you're going to have A lot of fun here in this 2020 campaign, right?
A lot of work to do.
A lot of work to do. And you got a lot more Democrats to talk to, too. Thanks so much for coming in, Jack.
Thanks for
You
having
can follow Jack at religionnews.com.
This is the Bill Press Show. Giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show. Live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
All right, if you're keeping count, we're up to 16. Yes, Congressman Tim Ryan yesterday becoming the 16th Democrat to say, I'm running for president in 2020. But believe me, it doesn't stop there. We could get up to 20, 22, or 3 before the stage is full. Hello, everybody. It is a Friday, April 5. Great to see you today. Hello, 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 and welcome to the program, The Bill Press Show, live from Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, where we bring you our roundup of the news of the day on every front, what's happening in Washington, D.C., around the country, and around the globe, from our perch right here on Capitol Hill, just down the street from the United States Capitol building. We've got it covered. And again, we'll tell you what's going on. Big news yesterday with the president after a week of threats. Backed down and said, no, I'm not going to close the border after all. I'm going to put Mexico on a 1-year notice, though, that if they don't improve in terms of stopping the flow of immigrants or refugees and drugs into the country, then we'll close it down a year from now. So he says. Meanwhile, the president's saying there could be a new deal with China in the making, and I want to appoint the Godfather pizza guy to the Federal Reserve Board. Oh, my God. Lots to talk about here. That's why it's good to welcome from ThinkProgress, our good friend Alan Pyke here is a friend of Bill for the hour. Hello, Alan. You ready to go? Ready to go?
I am. How are you?
Lots going on.
Yeah, I was going to say, you say it could get 2022. Do you have an over-under in mind? And if so, would you like to gamble on it?
Oh. Peter can tell you I'm not a gambling man except when it comes to the Powerball. I do buy Powerball tickets.
Okay. Yeah. This is a safer bet, but I was not going to offer you quite such enticing stakes as the Powerball, I'm afraid.
It just shows you what a lousy gambler I am if I spend money on Powerball, willing to spend money on Powerball tickets. Okay, we'll jump right in with your help and your comments all the time. Welcome on Twitter at BP Show. But first,
this is the Full Court Press.
All right, just a couple of other stories making news. So doctors are now speaking out against a problem that they are seeing more and more these days. Call it whatever you want. Some people call it tech neck. Some people call it selfie wrist. Some people call it cell phone elbow. But basically, these are all problems that people are developing because they spend too much time on their cellular devices. One doctor that they quoted in this story,
not like tennis elbow, where you're using,
Well, one doctor in particular says that he was on an airplane and he saw this guy had his phone, and the way that he was looking at it, he said his chin was touching his chest, and he was lurching forward in a way that just mechanically was not good, and it's bad. And he said that he watched the guy do this for the entire flight. And then, of course, when he stood up, he starts, holding his neck, massaging his neck because, his neck hurt.
Yeah.
Well, this is a problem that a lot of doctors are seeing more and more of, and they're just saying, just be aware of how much time you spend looking down at your phone.
Well, you got to remember, none of this is actually going to end up being a problem because sooner rather than later, we're all going to be getting injected with young human blood, courtesy of Peter Thiel.
That's right. That's right.
And that's going to clear up all of these so-called physiological drawbacks of our glorious technological future, Peter.
That's right. Yeah. No, that's absolutely right.
We got that settled.
Yeah, settled. We just finished talking a lot about religion with Jack Jenkins. Well, there is a new survey about religion here in America. And the number of people who now say that they have no religion has risen 266% in the last decade.
Whoa.
1/3 of the population says they are not religious. They are not religious. Now, of the people who say that they are religious, Catholics make up 23%, evangelicals are 22.5%. But again, those that say they have no religion, 23.1%.
I would add that half of the people who say they do are lying.
Yeah, right. Yeah, fair. Fair.
This is the Bill Press Show.
On a Friday, April 5, hello. It is the Bill Press Show. And yes, indeed, after a week of bluffing, Donald Trump is back down, says, no, I'm not going to shut down the border after all. Maybe for once he listened to his top economic advisors at the White House and Republicans in Congress who warned him against it. Hello, everybody. On a Friday, April 5, it's good to welcome you to the Bill Press Show, live from our nation's capital, as always, and joining you nationwide as coast to coast on Free Speech TV, joining you worldwide online on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show, and Chicago, you own us on WCPT. Good to be with you starting off this Friday. Launching you into the weekend, but not before we bring you up to date on all the news of the day for this next hour with the help of Alan Pyke from ThinkProgress. Good friend here as a friend of Bill for the entire hour. Alan, everything good?
So far. So far.
All right. Well,
long weekend ahead of us.
Early in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So were you surprised? Donald Trump, a lot of tough talk about the border, and people were kind of freaking out. I think rightfully so. That the impact it might have on the economy, and yesterday he totally backed down.
Yeah, I think I saw a story, I think in Bloomberg, that the price of one particular type of avocado had spiked by like 43% in 6 hours of trading or something like that. And the second I saw that, I thought, well, this isn't going to take.
Oh, right.
No, and I don't mean any guacamole jokes here, or this is why millennials can't afford houses. Humor about it. Just this is the pattern, right? He spits out some grand sounding pronouncement, the kind of thing that the presidents in the movies that he's seen like to say in the speeches that get written for presidents in movies, because it sounds really good.
Yeah,
and then there's some set of actually, I'm sure they're paid quite well. There's some set of rich souls who work for him who then have to scramble to put together a briefing book short enough for him to care about reading it that explains why, actually, Mr. President, if we did that, X million people in our own country would be punished by what you're talking about. The number that I forget if it was Mitch McConnell or if it was Mitch McConnell quoting an economist, but I've heard people toss around the number 5 million American jobs. Potentially being lost if you just slam shut the entire southern border.
I have to double check. I think that came from the National Association of Manufacturers or the Chamber of Commerce, one of those groups.
One of those super reliable sources that we're famously comfortable.
They're pro-business.
But
they're pro-business, basically Republican organizations.
Yeah, and much like although I'm sure they have bean counters who are much more meticulous than the president is about how they say things. It's all pump. It's all stagecraft, right? There's a pattern to this administration, and it's Donald Trump wakes up with an idea. Or wakes up and wants a sandwich, and while he's making himself a sandwich, he hears, Kim Strassel have an idea on Fox, and then has an idea, and then he's gonna, the next camera he finds himself in front of, he's apt to throw it out into the world. And the line has blurred pretty tremendously on which things that a sitting United States president says are actually going to happen, or are actually maybe already happening, have any sort of formal weight of policy or doctrine, and which are tweets and jokes and provocations. In this case, this seems to be part of how Trump thinks one ought to navigate the world. You lay down a grand threat, give everybody a couple of days to sweat about it, and then come back out and say, how about this? We'll wait a year before we do that ridiculously bad thing. And as long as you meet these basically synthetic goals that I'm going to set for you, that I seem to believe require no work from me, that are all on you to fulfill, then I won't do that horrible idiot thing a year from now.
So if we're not going to have a border shutdown, pivoting, the president did yesterday, then maybe we'll have a deal with China. So first of all, this is Donald Trump yesterday telling reporters the deal is in the works, going to land any day now.
The deal is coming along really well. We'll probably know over the next 4 weeks. It may take 2 weeks after that to get it papered.
Okay, so deal's in the works, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now you and I were reporters. You get down there, we're in the Oval Office, and we want to know, okay, so tell us a little bit about the deal. Okay, what are some of the details of the deal? What are some of the provisions in the deal? Well, let's try to get an answer here.
This will be a really terrific, very unique deal. This is an epic deal, historic, if it happens.
So
those 4 adjectives, right?
It's epic, it's historic. I forget what a big.
It's epic, unique, historic, and I think big.
Yeah, and big. Okay, that's where actually. No. Okay.
So Dumbo. He's acquired the actual elephant Dumbo that can talk and fly from China.
No. Let's ask.
Do we have to give back a panda? Is my concern now. I'd love to have Dumbo. I think it'd be great for the kids.
Folks,
I just don't want to give up the pandas.
Folks, everyone loves him. Who doesn't love Dumbo?
Okay. All right. Well, that was good, Mr. President. Now let me ask you again. How about some of the details of the deal?
It's going very well. Top officials are here. And, we're very well along on the deal. It's a very complex deal. It's a very big deal. It's one of the biggest deals ever made, maybe the biggest deal ever made.
Complex, big, one of the biggest ever made. And in fact, how about another? We'll try again, all right? Another slice here. Let's try again. Just name the top 2 provisions.
It's a very unique set of circumstances, but it's a massive deal. Could be one of the, I guess it is, if you think about it, the biggest deal ever made. There can't be a deal like this. No matter where you look, there can't be a deal like this. This is the granddaddy of them all.
There we go.
This is how junior college professors talk when they get a little too stoned with their students by accident, like when they're trying to be cool. And they take one toke too many of the sophomore kid in the back's joint, and then some very eager freshman asks them a very earnest and detailed question about like something right in their wheelhouse, just right there on the syllabus.
This is the granddaddy of them all.
It sure is that, Jimmy. I tell you what it is, it's that. And the thing is, I'm sure if you go back and look at platitudes are part of the art form, right? Like always have been. There's a certain version of this that presidents are supposed to do. Just embellish and embiggen whatever it is they're working on. Provide as few specific details as possible. Barack Obama was a fairly wonky public presenter of information.
If you would ask him that question, he'd still be talking.
Right. You'd be talking about micrometer differences in the thickness of various sheets of aluminum for some reason, and no one would care, right? And this is the thing that Trump seems to have figured out is whether or not anyone wants to call him on this perpetual thoughtlessness or perpetual absence of specific information in everything he says, that all you get is these yearbook superlatives. This deal is most likely to succeed and also best hair. And that's it. Press conference over. nobody seems to be able to effectively disrupt to break that circuit. Everybody around him is going to repeat the same things, and then chastise you if you so much as suggest that the public might be deserving of slightly more information about the thing.
Yeah. It is funny. As you mentioned, Barack Obama. I remember during the Obama years when we did have briefings and when we had news conferences, not just, walking on the South Lawn to the helicopter and stopping to say a couple of things, that our complaint then in the press corps was, we might have an hour news conference, but you'd only have 3 questions because Obama's answers were so damn long. Right? And we kept it was TMI. Just shut up. Just stop. Right? We don't need to know that much detail.
Let me be clear. Well, okay, you can be clear for, 3 minutes. You don't have to take 45 minutes.
He would go on and parse everything. And,
right?
Yeah. It is
so
much the opposite of what we get today.
And part of that, I know you know this, I'm not breaking any new ground here, but obviously part of that was that Barack Obama is both a person who took the sort of standard mantle of the presidency quite seriously, and someone who's very aware that he was the first black person to hold the office, and that he would therefore be fairly or unfairly, quite obviously unfairly, held to a different standard in terms of his own comportment. If he didn't, if he project the handful of times that he projected any even basic human emotion, the very first, I think it was the first spring that he was in office when a cop in Cambridge, Massachusetts arrested Skip Gates on his own porch, and Obama quite naturally gets asked about it. And this is a year, I think, maybe 2 before Trayvon Martin's killed, and 2 years before Michael Brown is killed, and we have protests in the streets seemingly every day about police violence. He's just asked about it at a sort of that same kind of just informal press gaggle, and I think the quote is something like, "It was a stupid thing to do." But that's as harsh a criticism of the officer as he gave, and I'm pretty sure that it's balanced against. It's sort of a condemnation of both of them, but just a basic observation. Yeah, arresting a guy on his own front porch seems pretty stupid.
I mean,
Fox lit up. Fox, every single follicle of Fox's head was on fire for weeks.
Yeah.
He had no room to be anything less than a sort of grave, dignified projection of calm, of deep, deep serenity and calm and knowledge and expertise. Donald Trump has to be none of those things.
No. Oh no, no. Remember that ended up in the beer summit.
Yep. That's right.
One thing that we haven't talked about that has gotten a little bit of attention. Really strange. The arrest of this Chinese woman at Mar-a-Lago this week.
Yeah.
So this is Mar-a-Lago. So she got in last weekend, right? That's when the story broke this week.
Right.
It was the last weekend. That she was able to get in, carrying through the Secret Service, through the hotel security.
Yeah.
And she had several passports and a thumb drive with, what's it called, malware? Is that?
Yeah, it had malware on it.
Malware on it, right?
A virus, basically.
A virus, yeah. Now, she didn't have a gun, right?
Right.
But the president was on the property,
Sure.
and the first lady on the property.
Sure.
And she was able to penetrate the security there. It's like somebody being able to get into the Oval Office.
And it's very easy to reach his USB drive if you can get close enough. It's right under the back of the wig. I think it's the left side.
That's why he's got that haircut.
And who knows what she was up to? But but it just raised some questions about the security at Mar-a-Lago. Of course, Sarah Huckabee Sanders yesterday said, "Blame the Democrats."
It's good to know that they care about the president's safety. We're thankful for that. But they spent so much time talking about one person at Mar-a-Lago and the security there, but they've ignored over the last 2 years the thousands of illegal immigrants that are rushing our borders.
Here it is. For the last 2 years, the media has not talked at all about the border.
My boss spends a lot of time at his vacation home, which is so poorly secured that a woman whose explanation is, I don't know, some guy sent me a passport and a thumb drive and said, hey, go there, was able to get in. Which reminds me, you guys are bad.
Yeah.
And also Mexicans are scary.
Right.
It's
that's a message. It's just insane.
I can't decide. There's a chicken and the egg thing here of which is the sort of the prime mover of stupidity in all of this. If it's these people, this group of people themselves, or if it's the television structures that they utterly rely upon for this kind of crap to work. Because the reason that Huckabee Sanders has lasted in this job so long compared to her predecessors, I think, is that she's much more comfortable. I don't want to say skilled, although I suppose in some dark sense it is a skill, but she's much more comfortable just blinking once in the face of a pretty direct question and saying something utterly benign and unrelated, finding one benign sort of semi-practical pivot away from what you've actually asked her about, and just going back to something that makes the president's Twitter thumbs or reflexively reach for the like button.
Yeah. Well, and who knows what her intentions were with this thumb drive or whatever, but it does that. If you add that to this woman who owned the spa where Robert Kraft was arrested, who turned out to be a regular at Mar-a-Lago, taking Chinese business people there with the idea that they might run into the president, be able to have a conversation with him. You'd have to wonder what the hell's going on, right?
Yeah.
At what the president has chosen, his place, right, as his escape White House.
Right.
So of course he's making money every time he goes there. And what kind of security exists?
Sure. And I think it's reflective too of the kind of businessman that he is, and has been over his career. You know, this is not a Steve Jobs guy who's got meetings back to back every 45 minutes. His whole shtick is sit somewhere opulent, and people will want to come be near me, and that'll make me feel good. And every once in a while, one of them will also walk up and be like, "Could I hand you $1.5 billion for no real reason?" And that's fun.
Or could I talk to you about my little business problem I've got or whatever? I mean, I have a friend who lives here in Washington, who's a lobbyist, has a house in West Palm Beach, goes to West Palm Beach, goes to Mar-a-Lago simply because he'll have a chance of running into Trump. And guess what? It happens almost every time Trump is there.
Yeah.
I mean,
which is damn near every weekend.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, lots of questions about that. So I don't know anything about your background or where your family came from. Did you come from Germany? Oh.
No. Do you really want to know? I don't.
All right,
I didn't think
so. Do you like Germany?
I don't.
That got a laugh out of Ray.
Yeah,
I hear that out of the booth.
I don't want to hear anything else about except Germany.
I want
to know what you think
Peter,
about Germany.
Yeah. I want to hear about it.
Germany seems nice. I was there this fall. I watched a soccer game. I was allowed to drink inside of a train station at my leisure, which I enjoyed. I did, sorry Germany, get harassed by an actual literal Nazi out front of said train station. But again, soccer game, lots of people drunk. I'm sure that's an unfair characterization of the country as a whole.
You and Donald
did happen.
You and Donald Trump have something in common. That's what I was getting to. We know how much he loves Germany. He made this comment this week.
I mean, Germany honestly is not paying their fair share. I have great respect for Angela, and I have great respect for the country. My father is German, right? Was German, and born in a very wonderful place in Germany. So I have a great feeling for Germany.
His father was born in the Queens.
Right. the Queens.
Yeah. What's this all about?
And I don't know.
How could you lie about where your father was born?
And does he know he's lying? Does he care? I fight with my editors occasionally about whether I can use this word on our website. And this is where you got to stop me while I'm in the middle of this sentence if I can't use this word that you don't know what it is yet on your
I don't know what the word is, so I can't tell you whether you can use it or not.
There's a great little book, a treatise, I suppose, that a professor of mine in college had us all read called On Bullshit.
Yes.
That's delineating a very technical, practical communications professional's definition of the difference between lying and bullshit. Lying is you know what you're saying isn't true, and you're saying it anyway to some calculated purpose.
Let's not say the word anymore.
All right.
Okay.
The other word.
Thank you.
The other thing is you actually don't know if it's true or not, and you don't really care if it's true or not. You just sort of want to say it, and you're pretty sure that saying it will get other people talking about it in a way that helps you. And that's, I think, the central premise of Donald Trump's communications strategy. Whether it's about something as banal and tiny as, no, dude, your dad was born in Queens. You're Mets fans for life, and I'm so sorry to say, because that's even I don't care for you personally myself, but that's a heavy burden for any man to bear.
But the other thing about that comment, which is just patently false, it came on the same day that he said this.
No collusion, no obstruction. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation.
So the oranges of the investigation.
Wait, these are the oranges that aren't coming in from Mexico
That's
anymore
right.
because
Yeah,
we
right,
closed
right.
the border? Yeah.
Who are the orange? I'm sorry. Did I lose it? Did I miss a chapter?
He meant to say origins, but he was saying oranges. He was trying to say origins, but he said oranges. And it's also the same these
day.
all happened on the same day that he went out and he talked about windmills causing cancer.
Oh, yes, windmills.
And they say the noise causes cancer. You tell me that one, okay? You know, the thing makes it so... And, of course, it's like a graveyard for birds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
all on the same day.
All the same day. And the thing that's wrong, of course, with windmills is because the wind doesn't always blow.
Bill, do you ever wonder if there's been some sort of awful mistake made years and years hence, and you and the president were supposed to have each other's jobs, because I listen to that, and what I hear is this is a man who can fill time. If the producer's waving frantically from the booth, like, hey, I don't know what's wrong, I can't go to break, something's, you gotta just go, man, just go. Windmills, it's it's like a graveyard for birds, right? My uncle was a bird. He was born in Germany as a bird. It took a lot of surgery to overcome, but he did finally. He does still flap at the elbow sometimes, but that's just that's gonna happen when you were born a bird in Germany, like my uncle was. Anyway, like I was saying about windmills, and suddenly 3.5 hours have gone by.
Right. Listen, I just saw Network last weekend.
Yeah.
Remember the movie?
Yeah.
Right. Donald Trump could be Howard Beale.
Sure.
Right.
Some small offense to Howard Beale there. But
right.
He at least he had actually, I guess they're roughly as coherent as each other as messages.
But
as
that's
core
what they
messages.
did, right? I mean, Howard Beale goes off the rails, and then they think first the great movie Network. If you haven't seen it, go on Netflix or go to New York and see the play with Bryan Cranston. But he goes off the rails. Their first instinct is to pull him off the air, and then they say, "Oh hell no, this is great for ratings."
Yeah.
And then they just let him go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's also why we see when he does do these press conferences, which he hasn't done a ton of them, but when he does do them, they are just rambling 2-hour long.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, so when Jair Bolsonaro was in town, the president of Brazil, was in town a couple weeks ago. A friend we have in common, Travis Waldron, was there for that event and wrote a couple of really excellent stories about it for HuffPost. And at one point, I hadn't watched it on TV, but he was telling me this. At one point, I guess the president's teleprompter froze up or got screwy. Because you can always tell the difference between Donald Trump on book and Donald Trump freestyle, right?
Yeah.
And he had started out as the on book Donald.
He's not good on book.
He's not good on book. You can tell he's reading. He puts the pauses in the wrong places.
Right.
But it's
stiff.
Yeah, it's like the God love him, the like third dumbest kid in your English class in 9th grade who, when he got called upon to read, like he could string it together, but he wasn't hitting the emotions of it. Anyway, so at some point, I guess during that joint presser with Bolsonaro, Trump's prompter went on the fritz, and he just started ad-libbing. And we're also inured to it, especially folks who've been covering the White House with any specificity for a couple of years now. So inured to his like sort of style, like. But Travis said that there were all these traveling press. There's this big traveling press corps from Brazil there for the event, who just seemed baffled that suddenly he seemed to have broken off of this perfectly benign, standard issue, address alongside another foreign leader, platitudes, and suddenly I don't even remember the meat of it, but it was something of the their graveyards for birds sort of species of Trumpism. And Travis said he had to like explain to a couple of people later who were like, what the hell was that? Where did that come? He was,
Was that just lost in translation? No, it doesn't
right.
make sense in any language.
Didn't work for us either. But here's what happened: the prompter froze.
All right. Now, talk about a blast from the past. Donald Trump yesterday revealed his new choice for the Fed, for the Federal Reserve Board. There are 2 vacancies, and he's already named Stephen Moore, who's got his set of problems for one. His second, to fill the second seat, we'll let the president tell us.
I've recommended Herman Cain. He's a very
Herman Cain,
a terrific man, a terrific person. He's a friend of mine. I have recommended him highly for the Fed.
Godfather Pizza.
Godfather Pizza.
Yeah.
Numerous allegations of sexual misconduct settled via non-disclosure clause.
He was forced out in 2012 when he was a candidate for president. There were at
right.
least 4 women.
Yep.
The Washington Post contacted 3 out of the 4 yesterday to get their views on the fact that. So this is.
Bill, you know what my favorite part of this is?
No, I'm going to find out.
He's more qualified to serve on the Fed than Trump's other pick for these 2 vacancies right now.
Stephen Moore.
Yeah. Stephen Moore is a nut job who's just been holding down. I mean, and that's, I can say that I too am a nut job. I'm not being nominated for the Fed is the difference. Yeah, the crazy thing about this Herman Cain story is I saw this announcement yesterday. Apparently, this had been rumored back in January, and I had missed it.
He interviewed him in January.
Okay, and so they've been vetting him since.
Right.
And I saw it, and my immediate reaction was like, wait, hang on. The last I heard from Herman Cain was that he had become a meme on Twitter. There's this really creepy slow grin at the end of one of his web ads from the 2012.
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember this?
Right.
He's just like he's sort of like 45 degrees to camera, and but his eyes are square onto camera, which is already unsettling, and just very slow sort of break into it. And he's got a great smile, but there was something very eerie about it, and that came to be used as a sort of shorthand for a variety of things online. And I was like, that guy for the Fed, this can't be real. But he, as compared to Stephen Moore, is a sort of credible pick. He served on an advisory board for the Kansas City Fed for like 6 years, 4 or 6 years in the early 90s. He at least knows more or less what the Fed does. Stephen Moore just said the other day, yeah, no, if I got this job, I'd have to get up to speed. I'd have a real steep learning curve. Awesome. I believe he used the phrase steep learning curve.
So what strikes me is Stephen Moore has now gotten a little hot water because it turns out he hadn't paid his taxes. And hadn't paid his child support.
Presumably part of why the president wanted to hire him.
Exactly. And now...
Bring me your finest tax cheats.
Right. And now here is Herman Cain, who's also accused of sexual assault and sexual harassment, like the president, right? Yep. So these are the 2 people that they're both are sort of little
peas and pods,
little Trumpers here. But I don't remember that smile on the spot.
We'll find it for you. We'll find it for you.
I'm sure you will.
You really got to see it. It's
what
terrifying.
I remember best
about
Herman Cain in 2012 is...
Imagine there's no pizza.
Oh, God. I forgot about
I couldn't if I tried. Eating only tacos or Kentucky Fried.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Listen, it's not a bad voice.
I have to say, the guy can sing.
He is welcome. He is welcome at any karaoke night I'm involved in. I'll tell you that.
You know the other thing. One of the other things. There are so many little pieces of the Herman Cain story that I had forgotten about. But do you remember when he gave one of his speeches and people started looking at his speeches, and it turns out he lifted like paragraphs from a speech that was in the Pokemon movie?
Right.
He from the like a children's cartoon movie. He lifted this whole thing from it.
Here's the question: what's the interest rate going to be if Herman Cain gets on the board?
Hey, now, if you won't gamble with me on how many Democrats are going to run for president, you don't get to make me pick interest rates.
That's an easy answer. 999. I give that credit. That was Mitt Romney's line yesterday. So there we go.
Herman Cain's whole campaign reads now in hindsight as somebody like trying out like a test version, an alpha version of what if we just dumbed it all the way down, made it zany, and the problem is Herman Cain had enough of a sense of humor about himself Trump, they just stripped that part out.
Do you remember
Herman Cain was #1 in the polls?
He was.
Do you remember there was
good time
when we were in South Carolina for the primary, the Republican primary that year? Herman Cain had that big announcement. I'm going to announce who my running mate is. Do you remember this? And he came out, and his running mate was
the people,
the American people,
The American people.
the
yeah.
American people.
That's
are my
the Time
running mate.
magazine cop out.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
That's sad.
Hey, we got a lot more to go here, so we're going to take a quick break. Emily Atkin joins us, science and environmental politics reporter for the New Republic. What's gone on with the Green Deal? Does Jay Inslee have a chance as the climate change candidate? Alan Pyke stays with us. Emily Atkin joins us. You're still on board. Quick break. We'll be right back.
Take The Bill Press Show anywhere you go. Download our free podcast. Search for The Bill Press Show on iTunes and catch the highlights from every show.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation letter.
You're resigning.
Why? Because you're constantly ignoring me. You're half as active as you used to be, and you get stuff like this. You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
I forgot. I'll do better. Please, don't quit on me.
Okay, but remember, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Adventure can be found anywhere, but the best place to start is in the forest.
I spy something beginning with S.
Snow?
No.
Snow-covered trees.
Nothing to do with snow.
Head outside to discover incredible animals and beautiful plants that come together to create an unforgettable adventure.
Wow.
So grab your loved ones.
Don't even.
And explore a world of possibilities.
Come on, this way.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find the closest forest or park to you.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the agony of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
This is the Bill Press Show.
Friday, April 5, the Bill Press Show, live from our nation's capital. Good to have you with us today. Alan Pyke here from ThinkProgress as a friend of Bill. Emily Atkin from New Republic joining us shortly. She's got that long Uber ride here, and we're just waiting for Uber to deliver. Speaking about delivery, Alan, the Department of Labor has just delivered the job numbers for the month of March 2019. Peter, what do we have?
How do we do?
Yes, indeed. Here we go. The U.S. economy added 196,000 jobs in March. That's from the Labor Department. They call that a fairly strong rebound from a slow job growth in February. The unemployment rate stayed at 3.8%. They are calling this a spring bounce.
Those are good numbers.
Yeah,
huh? No
Those
doubt
are
about
perfectly solid numbers. Yeah, it's slightly above what I understand to be the sort of replacement rate.
Yeah,
that you need to just be sort of
and
keeping
I have
everybody
lost
where they are.
track of. It started, of course, under President Obama, of how many straight months we've had with not just positive job growth, but over 100,000. I mean, it's 50, 60 months or something in a row
it's
now,
been a
at
while
least.
at
Yeah.
this point.
So that's good. That's good, robust numbers. And people used to say, and I guess it's still true, that 5% was full employment, and it's been under 5% now for several months in a row.
Well, and a lot of that is attributable to people taking part-time work who'd rather have full-time work, to people moving out of the numbers entirely. The discouraged worker numbers have trended down, which is good, and that's happened without the unemployment rate going back up, which is even better. But the numbers paint a picture that is slightly rosier than the reality I think a lot of people are still feeling in this economy at this point.
Right.
That was a problem for Obama, too, I think. You saw these great numbers for Barack Obama, and there were still a lot of people out there that didn't necessarily see or feel those great numbers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's what happens when you let a bunch of really rich bankers steal something like $17 or $18 trillion worth of housing wealth from working people, and nobody goes to jail.
Yeah. That sounds right.
Or does anything about it.
Alan Pyke here with us as a friend of Bill for the entire hour, and as we mentioned, pleased to welcome to the table here, joining us from New Republic science and environmental reporter, Emily Atkin. Hey, Emily, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Uber working this morning, is it?
Like a little here and there. You know what happens when it rains?
There's
and
a tiny bit of rain in D.C.,
no.
so it's
right.
It's Mad
raining.
Max out there.
It's rained like 4 drops, so everyone forgot how to drive.
No, exactly. And the rates, of course, for Uber go up in the rain because there are not that many.
I was gonna bike, but I didn't want to. I don't want to look like a mess. So.
You didn't, but you didn't have as long an Uber ride this morning as the newest member of the Yankees did. Peter told us the story earlier. Listen to this.
There's that guy that was a minor league player for Scranton, and the Yankees needed a third baseman, so they called him and said, "We need you to get up here as fast as you can." And
from Scranton, Pennsylvania.
From Scranton to New York City, the fastest thing he could think of was just getting an Uber. So he took a 2-hour Uber ride.
I can understand that that's the fastest thing he could think of. Surely the New York Yankees could have thought of something a little bit faster than that. Perhaps an aircraft of some kind.
You would think.
I know Scranton is a rough town, but I believe they have helipads somewhere on some rooftop.
But don't be too harsh on the Yankees. They paid for his Uber fare.
They did pay for his Uber. They did reimburse him for his Uber.
Right. I know we want to get to some of these environmental issues, and particularly the Green New Deal here, Emily, but I've got to mention that maybe somebody could say the last thing we needed is one more Democrat running for president, but at any rate, we've got one. A good friend of the program's been a guest here many times, Congressman Tim Ryan from Ohio. Yesterday went on The View, ABC. That's a pretty good platform to launch from, and made it official. Here he is.
And I can go back just a few weeks where my daughter called me crying from school because her friend was crying to her. Her dad just got transferred at the local General Motors plant. The kids had to move.
Yeah.
And my daughter called me and she said, "You got to do something." And I said, "I'm going to do something. And I'm going to run for president of the United States. And we're going to make sure that
there you go. Rust Belt politician. Akron, Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio. That's sort of the heart of where a lot of jobs have been lost because of plants shutting down.
Yeah.
And so the question is, I think he's got a lane, but with all this crowded field, do you think he can ever break through? What's your take?
I don't know. Something about the idea that we need another sort of Rust Belt.
White male?
Well, I wasn't going to say it, but white dude. But, I mean, it doesn't matter who resonates. It matters who has the most message. So, I mean, I'm surely interested to see what he has to say. But I think that I'm still wary of the idea that it's somebody who's going to appeal to dissatisfied Trump voters now rather than appealing to who the left's base is, who are like those more Bernie Sanders, AOC, like real true lefty progressives. But I don't know what Tim Ryan's platform is going to be. I don't know too much about him.
It's basically going to be, I think, jobs, and broadband. He's been very big on jobs by expanding broadband.
That question of what each of these people believes the path is to beating Donald Trump, I think is really, well, it's really interesting and it's really important, and it's really interesting to people in our profession. And I don't think it's the kind of, it doesn't make for electrifying television debate to have people sort of, and people aren't ever really honest about their strategic thinking in public around their competitors. So I don't know if we'll ever get really clear, honest answers to any of those questions. But I share Emily's concern that from what I know, you know Tim Ryan better than either of us for sure, but from what I know of him, he strikes me as the kind of person who would be inclined to believe that there are still people who, like this president, whose ears are open to something other than just voting for this president again. And I don't know any of those people or where they are hiding from pollsters or if they exist. And I'm well aware that living on Twitter, you're not going to see any. But I haven't found any evidence anywhere of there being any sort of particular softness to. There seems to be a quite hard floor to Trump's support within the Republican Party. And that's consistent with the pretty hard floors that you can associate with Fox News viewership. There's been some really interesting polling lately on differences within the Republican Party based on who primarily or exclusively gets their information from Fox News. And one thing that network and media empire have done is establish a rock solid floor of support. And I'm curious to see what people like Tim Ryan, or for that matter, Kirsten Gillibrand or Amy Klobuchar or anybody else in this race thinks they can do about that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that, and it's going to be it's going to be tough for Tim Ryan to put together kind of resources to compete with somebody like Bernie, right, who raised $18 million, right, or what's it, 18 that he reported, I believe so. Yeah,
18.1, I think.
18.1. There you go. But I think what Tim Ryan sort of reinforces what Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar have been saying, and others have been saying, we have to have somebody who can appeal to that area where Democrats lost in 2016, right?
Or where people didn't vote in 2016.
Or where people didn't vote. Exactly.
I think that's the main question, is between which demographic do you want to appeal to? I also think that right now it's just, it's so early still that we're almost just talking about people's personalities and sort of what their demographic is. It's ultimately going to be what really exciting solutions to our biggest problems they pose. That's why the Green New Deal is so popular right now, is because it's a big, exciting solution. It's not just somebody coming out and saying, we're going to fight Trump and his policies are bad. It's saying, we're not only going to fight Trump and his policies are bad, we have this really big, exciting new policy that if you bring us into office, this is what we're going to pursue. And people are like, I mean, and that's one thing you don't have to live on Twitter to know. I mean, I sat down recently with a pollster from Gallup, and we went over some of the most recent national polling results on the environment and climate change and the Green New Deal and things like that. And the prioritization among people of climate change ever since the polling started after the Green New Deal came out has just skyrocketed, because all of a sudden people see a solution that they find exciting. And I think that they're like, you know what, this is a problem we can solve, and now I care about it. And so that's, I think Tim Ryan his challenge will be anybody's challenge, that they propose something exciting.
Well, one thing, of course, that the Green New Deal, I love it. Big, it's bold. You know, do we know all the details of it? No, we haven't seen the legislation. But the only thing the Republicans can do in response
instead of coming up with their own plan or their alternative approach to climate change or whatever, is to make fun or to mock the New Deal. Fox and Friends tried to do that yesterday. They went to a diner Midwest somewhere,
it was
right?
in Missouri. Yeah, they go to a diner in Missouri. They're asking all kinds of different questions.
Yeah.
And they get to this one guy about like, oh, look at this wacky Green New Deal. What's going to cost us so much money? Isn't that going to be just terrible? And this guy who's just sitting there eating his breakfast just has the best answers to everything that this Fox News questioner asks.
Jack is an info specialist, and he really wants Howard Schultz to talk about climate change, specifically the Green New Deal, which you support. Why do you support it?
Yeah, it's really important we keep below 2 degrees Celsius of average warming. Otherwise, the consequences are going to be devastating.
How do we pay for it?
Yeah, how do we pay for World War II? At the end of the day, when something is this important, our economy is going to suffer if we don't pay for it.
Okay, but you do agree with the sentiment that this is as big a deal, climate change that is, as World War II?
Yeah, I mean, a little over 400,000 Americans died in World War II, and climate change is killing 150,000 people per year at least.
Okay, let's talk about the money, because that's a huge part of this. How are we going to pay for it?
Yeah. So during World War II, for one thing, the government just pushed some of the cash up front and raised some tax on some folks. But at the end of the day, it stimulated the economy so much that everyone benefited.
Okay, so to review, you are in favor of raising taxes in order to support the Green New Deal.
If that's the optimal solution the economists sort out, I'll go with that.
The guy on Fox News just cannot understand this guy.
I want to know, how did that guy get in that diner?
Yeah, seriously.
He's too smart to be
I lived in Missouri for a while.
It's
a more politically diverse place than Fox probably counted on.
Okay, but that's the fastest speaking person from Missouri I've ever seen.
I mean, he had
That's
stuff
fair.
right
That's fair. They do top up your coffee pretty frequently at these diners.
Yeah.
He had everything right there. I mean, he gave
did.
every answer, and he was very sure.
But what is funny is the Fox reporter.
Well,
he can't he can't take no for an answer, right? Or yes.
How did we pay for World War II is just the best. It just came out so quick. I'm like, damn, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Well, and it's a perfect illustration of what you're saying about the power of the long untapped power of just telling people, hey, there's a gigantic thing we could do that could make the world better for you and your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody wants to stand up in the back and go, but how are you going to pay for it, sir? You go, that's a great question. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of money here. We can find it. This is probably not the right time to figure out exactly. I'm happy to take all of yours and some of hers and a little bit of his in the back, and we'll get there. I'm not worried about that next question. But just giving people something big and profound and meaningful. And I think that's something that the Democratic Party has sort of institutionally shifted away from to its disadvantage over the last generation or so. It's just getting back to a better world is possible for you and your kids. And I'm pretty sure I know how to get us there.
Look, in this young Democratic primary, right, new ideas are coming out like all over the place, right? Not Elizabeth Warren particularly, but you've got the wealth tax. You've got Kamala Harris is saying, I think, universal child care. People are talking about debt-free, not just debt-free, but free college tuition, the Green New Deal. I mean, every time you turn around, right?
Wayne Messam wants to wipe out every dollar of higher ed debt currently outstanding.
Wayne Messam, right. And then Andrew Yang with the universal.
He's got a geoengineering thing happening. What we can talk about that later.
Is that a Bond villain thing? Whenever somebody says I have a geoengineering thing, I imagine them inside of a volcano doing
far
something
more real
evil
than you realize.
Okay.
Yeah. So back to the Green New Deal. This is, if there's any one candidate who says this is my issue, it's Jay Inslee, climate change, right? Is this an issue that has that kind of potential and appeal? Just to say, I'm the climate change guy, do you think?
If it were not, if you had asked me this 6 months ago, I would have been like, no.
Yeah.
You know, I've been doing this for 5 years. I've been covering climate change in D.C. for 5 years, and nobody has paid attention to me for 5 years.
This is your moment.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
I mean, people have paid attention to me. But, you know, it is always, I always say this, it's always been so low, even on the Democratic priority list. You always see this polling that says that Democrats really believe that climate change is happening and that it's a threat, but if you poll them on their priorities, it's so low. I mean, it's always healthcare and jobs. And all of a sudden, we're seeing that it's skyrocketed to the top. many polls. I mean, I think in the last Iowa caucus poll, it was like potential Democratic voters, their top two priorities were healthcare and climate change when they're making their decision. That's a huge deal. And you're seeing that everywhere. And so I think that a candidate that does run on climate change, that of course have potential, maybe not, I don't know that Jay Inslee has like a lot of super potential charisma as like a candidate, but I think that his expertise is really going to push the other candidates to be more bold, and he's going to set
Plus,
like
he's a
litmus
governor
tests,
who's done
you know?
some things about it too, right?
Sure,
at
yeah.
a state level.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's at least pushed for. He got Washington to be the closest to having a statewide carbon tax that any state has ever gotten, which is also a huge deal. And very progressive governor. So it's really going to be awesome to have somebody who can, on a debate stage, call BS on some of the talking points that Democrats have just been able to get away with that really don't mean anything, to be like, and I'll fight climate change.
Yeah.
Next question.
Right.
You have to be like, no. What do you mean? Like, and how are you going to do it? And how are you going to include marginalized communities? And is it going to be through market-based mechanisms, or is it going to be through a stimulus plan, or what is it going to be?
Right. And isn't one of the I guess biggest selling points to me for the Green New Deal is you mentioned environment, jobs, in the economy, environment. I mean, the Green New Deal encompasses all of them, right? They're talking about Green New Deal, yeah, but green new jobs, green new economy, green new energy.
Well, yeah, that's what that's why it's a Green New Deal, is because it's not just a package of environmental proposals. It is a proposal to decarbonize the economy, right? And so decarbonizing the economy doesn't just mean we're going to, reduce carbon emissions from power plants. It means we're going to reduce carbon emissions from everything. We're going to transform the way the economy works. We're going to make, we're going to make roads different and transportation different, and the way everything is powered is going to be different. We're going to create jobs by doing it, and then if you do that, then you have to ensure it's a just transition that doesn't just, the jobs don't all go to white people, and then, how do you do that? That's why I argued in a recent piece that the Green New Deal should include reparations in it, because having all these conversations about reparations, but one of the biggest ways that historical injustices have played out is that Black and brown people live closer to power plants. They live in more polluted areas, and they're the most vulnerable to climate change. When climate change starts to really hit, they're the ones that are going to be affected first. So if we're going to decarbonize the economy, we should also equalize it in that way too.
Alan, America ready for?
I think so. I think that I come back to the as a matter of professional political communications. It's been, people have slipped in, and I'm not very familiar with Inslee specifically, but I imagine that if he was doing that kind of yeoman's work as an executive in a state government, that he must have some real ability to make the argument in a compelling way. Everybody, I'm hearing sound bites in my head from the last 10, 20 years of Democrats referencing climate change and realizing that the soundtrack I have in my head, it's at the end of a list of the problems, and it's usually it's as I'm running out of oxygen, I need to take a breath pretty soon, and of course also climate change. And anyway, so and if that's how you present it, it's been presented as this inevitability for a long time, because I think people who are really bought into the way that things have always worked in our economy, and the people who have benefited from that, who have gained, even if they're not spectacularly wealthy, their stability is based on it. Their 401k, their sense of their long-term security is threatened by anything that involves that sort of gigantic upheaval to every, as Emily says, every aspect of our economy. And you have to find a way to sell that, and I think fear is only one of those tools. It doesn't have to be the only one.
I just got to jump in with just about a minute and a half left, because Emily, you've been writing about this. So shall we all breathe a sigh of relief today that because Donald Trump is not going to close the border, that we will have all the avocados we need?
I don't care.
But there was this hysteria about losing the avocado, right?
Sorry. It's early. It's early. I can be like, well, what I think is that the media should not focus on avocados so much and focus on the real problem. But that is what I That is what I think.
But now we don't have to worry about the avocados.
You don't have to worry. Well, you do have to worry because climate change is going to ruin avocados eventually, too. It's also going to ruin coffee. It's going to ruin hamburgers.
It's a short-term problem versus a long-term problem.
Yeah, you have avocados tomorrow, but your children.
Think about our children's avocados.
There we go. We'll end on that note.
Nothing tastes good when you're drowning while you're eating it. That's the bottom line.
Alan Pyke, great to see you. ThinkProgress, thinkprogress.org. Emily, glad you made it.
Thank you for having
Thanks for
me.
your good work. At New Republic, newrepublic.com. It is Friday. That means the next 2 days are all yours. Make the most of the weekend, friends, and come back on Monday. We'll be looking for you.
This is the Bill Press Show.